The fog clung thick to the lake, like breath on glass, smothering, endless. Jonas dipped his oars into the still water, the blades slicing slowly, each stroke quiet and deliberate. He couldn't see 10 feet ahead, but he didn't care. Visibility didn't matter when you weren't going anywhere in particular. This was his place now, the middle of nowhere, wrapped in mist, where time had no meaning and memories had no beginning or end. The oarlocks groaned with each pull, the sounds strangely comforting. Jonas didn't look up. He hadn't looked up in days. The lake used to be his wife's favorite place. She'd make him laugh here. She used to tell him the fog looked like something magical was just waiting to be found inside it. But that was before. Now he rowed to forget, or maybe to remember, but more quietly. Then came the sound, sharp, heavy, out of place. Splash. Jonas stopped rowing. The boat rocked slightly, teasing the edge of balance. He held his breath. That wasn't a fish, not even a beaver. It was too loud, too deliberate. The kind of splash that meant wait and struggle. His hands tightened around the oars. Eyes lifted for the first time in hours, maybe days. The fog stared back at him. He leaned forward, narrowing his eyes as though squinting would help him see through the thickness. The noise echoed in his chest, not just his ears. There was something out there, something close. Maybe he should turn around, but a strange pull, half concern, half instinct kept him still. He wasn't afraid exactly, but something inside him shifted, a pulse of alertness, a thread of need. The wind picked up, brushing icy fingers across his face, but Jonas didn't flinch. Cold didn't matter. He'd lived colder nights inside his own head than anything the weather could offer. Still, the splash replayed in his mind. What kind of creature made that sound and didn't cry out again? His fingers hovered over the handle of the net, just in case. Grief didn't knock when it entered. It seeped in, like the fog. You didn't even notice until you couldn't see your way forward anymore. That was where Jonas had lived since the funeral adrift, heavy, unseen. He rowed because it gave him something to do. He breathed because that's what his body did. But living, that had stopped months ago. And yet, that splash, that strange sound, it stirred something. A shape emerged, barely more than a blur at first. Then it took on weight, movement, purpose. Jonas froze. Something was crawling, dragging along the shallows of the lake's edge. 4 legs, sloped back, wet fur. A dog. But it was pulling something smaller and limp. The fog shifted just enough for him to see. A German shepherd, soaked and shivering, dragging what looked like a kitten. Jonas's heart began to race, not from fear, but from the strange, aching confusion of seeing desperation that wasn't his own. He didn't think so. He just moved. His hand closed around the old wooden handle of his net. Muscles he hadn't used in weeks came alive as he pushed the boat toward the shore, closer to the dog, closer to the question this moment demanded he answer. Why here? Why now? The fog thickened around him again, like a test, but this time he didn't retreat. He leaned forward, eyes locked on the creature in the mist. Somewhere deep inside, a crack opened in the walls he'd built, and something warm tried to get through. The fog shifted slightly, like a curtain catching wind. Jonas blinked, then froze. Something was moving slow and heavy, half lost in there. Grey, it limped awkwardly, one step dragging behind the other. Water lapped around its feet. A dog, big, burdened, and dragging something behind it. Jonas leaned over the edge of the boat, heart ticking faster. He couldn't yet see what the animal pulled, only that it fought to stay upright. Every movement looked deliberate, as if this wasn't a chance, as if the creature had come with purpose. When the dog reached the shore, it collapsed for a second, panting. Mud clung to its fur, and its ribs showed faintly through its slick coat. Its eyes low, amber, and dull with flicker with fear. The thing it had dragged a bundle of fur let out a feeble sound. Kitten, tiny, limp. Barely moving, Jonas's throat tightened. The dog nudged it gently with its snout, then sat, shoulders drooping, waiting. The boat touched bottom with a thud. Jonas didn't wait. He stepped into the shallows, boots sinking in the silt, the cold biting through to his bones. He moved carefully, eyes locked on the dog. "Easy," he murmured, mostly to himself. "Easy now," he crouched, inching closer to the soaked pair. The kitten was half curled, soaked through, its breathing shallow, and still the dog didn't run. It just watched him. A soft, rumbling growl rose in the dog's throat. Not a threat, a warning. Jonas froze. He raised both hands, palms out. "I'm not gonna hurt either of you." The dog didn't move. Its eyes held something deeper than suspicion. It wasn't guarding itself. It was guarding the kitten. Jonas nodded slowly, heart thudding in his ears. "You got it here," he whispered. "Now, let me take it from here." As Jonas knelt beside the kitten, he saw it the rope, frayed, torn. A makeshift collar of sorts, stained with mud and age. This wasn't a stray. This was an escapee. The shepherd had broken away from something or someone, and it had dragged this kitten with it, across who knew how far. Jonas's jaw clenched. "What happened to you, boy?" He peeled off his flannel overshirt and wrapped it around the kitten with shaking hands. It barely stirred. Warmth. That's all it needed. Warmth and a chance. He held the fragile bundle against his chest, feeling its tiny heartbeat flutter. Memories. Rose unbidden his wife's touch, her voice when she cradled sick animals that wandered near the cabin. He blinked hard and swallowed them back. The shepherd stood now, shaky but firm. It looked at him not with fear, not even desperation, just trust, a silent plea, a tired kind of hope. Jonas met the dog's gaze, and for one impossible moment, it was like looking in a mirror. Both of them hollowed out, both clinging to something they didn't fully understand. "You did good," he whispered. "You kept her alive." The dog didn't respond. It didn't have to. Jonas glanced toward the hill where his cabin waited. Half lost in fog, he took a slow breath, adjusted the kitten in his arms, and started walking behind him. Footsteps followed, steady. The dog didn't need an invitation. It just knew, and for the first time in a long time, Jonas didn't feel like walking alone. Later, the fire crackled gently in the stove. Minnow, as Jonas would come to call her, lay nestled in an old wool scarf. The dog, now just shadow in Jonas's mind, curled near the hearth, his breathing slow and even. Jonas sat in his chair, staring at the two lives that now filled the cabin's silence. He didn't speak, but something warm flickered beneath the grief. A start, a shift. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight there was warmth, there was company, and something inside him, something long buried, began to thaw. Jonas didn't say the name out loud at first. It just slipped out one morning, quietly, as the dog padded silently behind him on the dock. "Come on, Shadow." The dog's ears twitched, then followed. It felt right, the way the animal moved. Like smoke present, but never demanding. Always watching. always there. The kitten, curled up now in a shoebox lined with an old towel, became Minnow. Names made them real. Not just survivors or strays, but something closer. Family. Their rhythm was unspoken. Mornings began with slow steps along the lake's edge. With his hands deep in his coat pockets, Minnow sometimes perched on his shoulder, and Shadow never more than a few paces behind. No words were needed. Not yet. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful, shared. Sometimes Jonas talked, sometimes he didn't, but the air felt easier to breathe, like the weight on his chest was finally loosening. Shadow didn't cower, he didn't bare his teeth. But sometimes, when a branch snapped too close or a drawer shut too hard, he'd jerk away like old ghosts were still whispering. Jonas noticed. He didn't press, didn't try to fix it, but when it happened, he'd stop whatever he was doing. Sit nearby. Say nothing. Shadow would eventually return to his side, tail low, eyes uncertain, and Jonas would murmur something soft, just enough to say, "You're safe here." And slowly, the flinches came less often. It started with one story. My wife used to feed birds out back every morning. He hadn't said her name in weeks, but now it came out easily, wrapped in old memories and firelight. Shadow lay near the hearth. Minnow dozed in the crook of Jonas's arm. The stories kept coming about the time he and his wife built the porch, or how she laughed at his crooked pancakes. Little things. Grief didn't leave, but it softened because someone was listening. Jonas looked at Shadow one night as they sat outside, stars peeking through the trees. She always talked about getting a dog. Never pushed me though. Said she'd wait until I was ready. He laughed, quiet, tired. I guess you showed up when I was too broken to say no. Shadow nudged his hand, just once. It was enough. The storm came fast. Thunder cracked overhead, and the lights flickered, then died. Jonas grabbed a flashlight, heart already racing. Minnow. He scanned the room. Empty box. The back door barely ajar. He swore under his breath, throwing on his boots, panic rising like floodwater. Shadow was already standing, alert and ready. Jonas didn't have to say a word. They burst into the downpour together. Jonas called out again and again, voice raw, against the rain. No answer. Minnow was so small, so fragile. Then Shadow barked once, sharp and urgent. He was pawing near the old shed. Jonas rushed over, sinking to his knees, pressing his ear to the wooden slats. A faint, shivering mew. Jonas exhaled like he'd been underwater. She's here, she's alive, and Shadow. Shadow had known. He cradled Minnow close to his chest, soaking wet and trembling, but alive. Mud streaked his jeans, rain soaked his hair, but Jonas didn't care. He laughed a hoarse, shaky thing and sobbed in the same breath. Shadow pressed, close, tail wagging, body warm against Jonas's side. I thought I'd lost her, Jonas whispered, but he hadn't, not Minnow. Not this moment. Not everything. They dried off. Shared warmth. Shadow curled up on the rug, Minnow tucked against his chest. Jonas didn't need to turn on the radio. The silence was full now, with breaths and heartbeats and something that felt like belonging. Jonas started cooking meals again, fixed the porch steps, left a light on in the window, even when he didn't need it. The house wasn't just a shelter now. It was a home again. It started with a low growl. Jonas had heard it before, but this one was different. It wasn't just protective. I was wary. Trained. Shadow stood stiffly at the window, eyes following something outside. Later, Jonas noticed tire tracks by the fence, deep, fresh, and unfamiliar. Shadow's ears stayed perked for hours after. Every passing truck made his hackles lift. Jonas tried to shrug it off, but the piece they'd found had just cracked. That night, Jonas locked the doors for the first time in months. He sat by the fire, Minnow nestled beside him, Shadow lying alert. At his feet, his eyes drifted to the rope still looped around Shadow's neck, frayed, stained, and now a reminder. Someone had let him go, but someone else might be trying to take him. Back. Jonas clenched his jaw, not without a fight. It was early afternoon. Jonas had just poured himself coffee when the low rumble of a truck broke the stillness. Not the delivery guy, not a neighbor. He knew that sound and shadow did too. The dog stiffened by the window, body suddenly tense. He didn't bark, he didn't move, he simply froze, as if his entire being recognized something it didn't want to face. Jonas set the mug down slowly, his gut twisted. Shadow's ears dropped slightly. His eyes locked on the vehicle before it. Even stopped moving. The driver door slammed open. A tall, wiry man stepped out in steel-toed boots and a battered denim jacket. He cupped his hands and called out, "Bruno, there you are, boy." His voice was too loud, too forced, like he was performing for someone. Shadow backed away from the window. Jonas stepped onto the porch. "Can I help you?" The man eyed him, then glanced toward the window. "Yeah, that's my dog." Jonas didn't answer right away. Something in his chest clenched. This wasn't just someone looking for a lost pet. This was someone trying to reclaim ownership with authority, not affection. "He's not yours," Jonas said quietly, but firmly. The man scoffed. "Who?" "He came to me, half-starved, dragging a half-dead kitten, with rope burns around his neck." The man pulled out a crumpled paper. "He's registered. Name's Bruno. Trained him myself. Got out during a thunderstorm. You've got something that belongs to me." Jonas didn't look at the paper. He looked at Shadow, now trembling, ears pinned back, body low to the floor. "No," Jonas said. "He doesn't belong to you anymore." 3 days passed. Then the deputy came, young, apologetic. "I don't like it either, sir, but technically he's got papers, unless you can prove abuse." Double quotes. Jonas didn't argue. Shadow barked and fought the leash. His eyes panicked, betrayed. "I'm sorry," the deputy said. Jonas stood on the porch, fists clenched, watching the truck pull away. Shadow's head poked out from the window before vanishing behind steel and tinted glass. The silence left. Behind was deafening. Minnow curled next to him on the couch, mewing softly. Jonas didn't move. His eyes were locked on the spot by the hearth where Shadow used to sleep. The fire burned low. The cabin felt like it had that first day again, cold, too quiet, too heavy. He hadn't cried since the funeral. But now the tears came, slow and bitter. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have stopped them." But sorry wasn't enough. Not this time. He didn't sleep. By morning, Jonas was dressed, flashlight and old thermos tucked in a weathered backpack. He scribbled a note, just in case, and left it on the kitchen table. Minnow stayed behind with a neighbor who owed him a favor. Jonas pushed the boat from the dock. Not for fish, not for peace. For Shadow. He didn't know exactly where the man lived, but he knew how to find out. And he knew he wouldn't come back without him. It was late afternoon when Jonas found the place, half hidden beyond a line of trees, reeking of oil and something darker. The compound was surrounded by fencing. Cages lined the back, and in one of them, Shadow. His fur was matted. His eyes were dull. He didn't even lift his head when Jonas whispered his name through the wire. That's what broke. Jonas most they'd taken his spirit. Not anymore. He waited until nightfall. Watched until the porch light flickered, then cut out entirely. Jonas crept along the tree line, heart pounding. His hands shook as he clipped the wire, slow and silent. The cage latch creaked. He held his breath. Shadow raised his head. Recognition flared in his eyes, but no bark. Just a low, broken whine. Jonas opened the door. "Let's go, boy." Shadow stood, hesitated, then walked out, straight into Jonas's arms. Outside the fence, Jonas paused. His heart beat wildly, not from fear, but from the ache of reunion. Shadow pressed against him. Licking his hand, "You remembered," Jonas whispered. "You held on." The dog barked, once short and sharp, not out of warning, not from fear. It was a joy relief. Home they started walking. The man was waiting. "Thought you might try this," he snarled, stepping from behind the barn. A flashlight beamed into Jonas's eyes, but Shadow stepped between them before Jonas could speak. His body tensed, teeth bared. A low warning growl rumbled from his chest. "Back off," Jonas said. "He's not your dog anymore." Shadow didn't move. He held the line, not as a weapon, but as a shield. It wasn't hate that drove him. It was love. Sirens cut through the dark. The shelter director pulled up with the local sheriff, papers in hand, witness reports, photos. "You're done," she told the man, "and we're taking the others, too." The man's protests faded into the night as he was led away. Shadow sat beside Jonas, quiet now, tail tapping softly. Jonas didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Shadow leaned his head against Jonas's leg. They were going home. The door creaked open, same as always. The wind whistled faintly through the chimney. The floorboards groaned beneath heavy boots. But something had changed. Jonas stepped inside, Shadow right behind him. Mino leaped from the neighbor's arms and into his, purring like she'd never stopped. The cabin looked the same. Same furniture, same quiet, same photos in their tilted frames, but it didn't feel the same. This time, the silence didn't press. Down, it settled, peaceful, lived in, held. He exhaled slowly. This was home again. By evening, the fire crackled once more. Shadow lay curled beside it, belly up, tail twitching in contentment. Mino sprawled across the window ledge, paw flicking at falling leaves outside the glass. Jonas sipped from his mug and watched them move through the space as if they'd always been there. There was a rhythm now, a quiet order to the chaos. Food, bowls filled, walks taken, footsteps followed. Soft meows answered. It wasn't grand or loud, but it was enough in the days that followed. Jonas did what he hadn't done in years. He started fixing things. The loose board on the porch, the gutter that always rattled in storms, the old wooden gate, but this time he didn't latch it shut. The gate swayed gently in the breeze, and so did the part of him that had stayed locked for so long. Neighbors passed by, and he didn't wave them off. When someone stopped to ask about the dog, he smiled and told them Shadow's name. He didn't hide anymore. They thrived. Shadow's tail, no, longer tucked when trucks rumbled by. He ran now, full speed, down the slope, ears flapping like wings. Minnow darted after him, chasing dried leaves and shadows alike. Jonas watched from the porch, arms crossed, coffee forgotten in his hand. It was simple, ordinary, but in every way. Every meow, every unguarded breath, they were healing. And so was he. It was sudden. It slipped out like a breeze. Shadow tried to catch his own tail, failed, and fell into Minnow's water bowl. Jonas laughed, genuinely, loudly. It startled even him. He laughed again a few days later, telling a story to an old friend on the phone. Then again, when Minnow got stuck behind the bookshelf, the sound came easier each time. His voice no longer carried only grief. It carried life again, one quiet afternoon. Jonas opened the old scrapbook his wife had started. He stared at the first page, her handwriting delicate, hopeful. Then he added a new page, a photo of Shadow curled up on the couch. Another Minnow balanced on his shoulder, wide-eyed. A caption, written in shaky pencil, found me when I didn't know I was lost. Each page blended past and present, grief and gratitude. He wasn't replacing the memories, he was expanding them. The rowboat drifted gently across the lake. Autumn leaves floated around it like quiet blessings. Shadow sat at the bow, ears perked, tongue out. Minnow stayed tucked in a crate lined with fleece, blinking at the shimmering water. Jonas cast his line, not caring if he caught anything. For once, fishing wasn't about escaping. It was about being here, present, whole. The fog hovered at the edges, but it didn't reach them. Not anymore. That evening, Jonas stood at the dock, watching the sun sink low. The mist tried to creep in, but it thinned against the light. Shadow nudged his legs softly, and Minnow curled around his boot. He looked down at them, eyes misting. "You brought me back," he whispered. The grief was still there, tucked in the corners of his heart. But it no longer ruled him. It walked beside him now, and he wasn't walking alone. Jonas sat on the porch steps, mug warm in his hands. Shadow lay beside him, head on his knee, eyes closed, chest rising with the rhythm of rest. No one spoke. They didn't have to. There had been enough noise in the world's shouts, breaking things, sharp words. But this was peace, built not on promises or explanations, but presence. Jonas looked down at the fur beneath his fingers, rough, scarred in places, just like him, and yet here they were, breathing the same air, healing in the same quiet. Some connections didn't need stories, just heartbeats that kept showing up. People had said the dog was lucky, but Jonas knew the truth. Shadow hadn't just been a soul in need, he had been a mirror, a guide, a friend. He remembered that first night, the limp kitten in his arms, the fog in his chest, the weight of emptiness he thought he'd carry forever. Shadow had never asked for much, just to be seen, to be trusted, and in learning to give that, Jonas had found his way back to something he hadn't dared hope for, a life again for so long. Grief had wrapped itself around him like the fog on the lake, dense, inescapable, always there. He had tried to outrun it, outsilence it, outfish it, but fog isn't something you fight. It's something you move through slowly, tenderly, with your eyes open for the shape of something else. Shadow had been that shape. Minnow, too. Not a cure, not a fix, but a hand, no, a point. Through the mist, what lifted the fog wasn't time. It was trust, and choosing to let someone walk beside him, even when he was still broken. Jonas had believed some things were behind him. That second chance came with deadlines. That once you lost, you stayed lost. He was wrong. Healing didn't care how many years you carried, or how deep your scars went. It only asked that you not turn away when it arrived tired, wet, growling low, but full of hope. Love could find you at any age. Redemption didn't care how long you'd been hurting. You just had to say yes when it showed up at your door. He reached over and scratched behind Shadow's ear. "You found me," he whispered. Shadow didn't move, just leaned in a little closer, the way he always did. Jonas smiled softly. He had rescued a dog that day on the lake, but the truth was, the dog had rescued him right back. And in the hush between them, surrounded by calm, he knew they were both finally home.